and welcome back to this second part of our session. And here we will focus specifically on the 6 gigahertz band. And we have a great panel lined up representing operators, regulators, as well as vendors. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Päivi Ruska, on behalf of ETNO, speaking for the European telecommunications operators. Over to you, Päivi.
Thank you, Stefan, and good morning, everybody. And thank you, organizers. I'm honored to say some words of importance of 6 gigahertz band from mobile operators' perspective. As Stefan already introduced, I'm Päivi Ruska. I work for Telia Company, and today represent ETNO Association as their Spectrum Working Group chairman. Next slide, please. For a start, a short introduction of what the ETNO Association is about, as everybody may not know about that. ETNO is a European Telecommunications Network Operators Association. It brings up operators' views to European telecommunication policy and regulatory work. It has 31 members, which are network operators operating in Europe, many also outside Europe, and 9 observers, including vendors and operators outside Europe. And as you can see here from the numbers, ETNO members are a big contributor to the network investments as well as society in Europe. Next slide, please. Here a short status of the 6 gigahertz band in Europe. As many of you may know, that the lower part of 6 gigahertz band is harmonized for wireless access systems and radio LANs on unlicensed basis in Europe. The decision was finalized in June, but the work on European harmonized standard is still ongoing. Harmonized use for unlicensed equipment in European Union means that anyone can buy and use the equipment without separate permissions in all European Union countries. This decision almost doubled the harmonized mid-band spectrum for unlicensed RLANs in Europe compared to the spectrum that was available earlier. And considering that due low power, the same channel can be reused relatively nearby, we think that this is a lot of additional spectrum for unlicensed RLAN. And as the decision is quite new, there is not yet real-life experience on the RLAN use in Europe, and not experience on the potential challenges either. For example, the low-power device category is limited to indoor use only to avoid potential interference, for example, for fixed links. But as the use is unlicensed, we see that in reality it's impossible to guarantee that the equipment is used as it is intended, meaning that indoor devices might be used also outdoors, and they may cause some interference to, for example, to our fixed links in some areas. The upper 6 gigahertz band is currently under study for IMT for WRC 23 in Region 1, and the preparations are also ongoing in European Regional Organization. And no decision has been made on future use, so the situation seems to be quite similar as in ASMG, so that there are different views also in Europe on the future use. ETNO, of course, supports the band for IMT opportunity, and we hope for balanced approach for whole 6 gigahertz band. The lower 6 gigahertz band has been assigned for RLAN already, and we think that the upper 6 gigahertz band should be assigned for IMT and for a bit higher power use as well. Harmonization beyond Europe is important for the ecosystem and economies of scale. And of course, WRC 23 will make decision for whole region 1, and we of course hope that that also like many or all regional organizations will support the IMT identification for this band. The main current use in the band is fixed and fixed satellite service, and for us, the band is important for backhaul service in many countries, especially for more longer haul links in more rural areas. So this actually means that many mobile operators actually are the current user of the band already on licensed basis for fixed links. But we think that the IMT identification and feasible conditions in radio regulations together with licensed use will allow to take well into account the current use as well as future demands in each country. Next slide, please. We, as an ethno organization and operators, we see that the mid-band IMT spectrum is needed or additional mid-band spectrum is needed in about 5 to 10 year time frame. And there are many studies supporting this. One, for example, from Coleago, so Stefan may know much more about this. And we have already heard excellent speeches in previous panel on spectrum needs, so I will not go very much details into the demands, but I will just note that in Europe, data traffic in mobile networks is about doubling every 2 years. And there are many reasons for this, as Peter from Vodafone already brought up in previous session. One reason that I think is quite important is that in Europe, European Union has for a long time had a strong focus on ensuring competition, low customer prices, as well as good coverage and good data speed. And this actually has led to the situation that many Europeans pay less for mobile service than people in many other regions. For example, a Western European pays about half of what North American does for mobile service, and about 40% less than citizens in East Asian countries. However, one consequence for operators is that operator revenues per capita in Europe are about 20% lower in 2020 than in 2010. So, and we actually believe that the regulators all over the world wish to ensure the low customer prices and connectivity with low carbon footprint. And of course, we wish to, as operators, we wish to deliver this. But of course, the development has to be sustainable. This means that the spectrum policy has to be linked with other connectivity goals that the regulators do have. It means that clear roadmaps on sufficient spectrum availability is a key to support investments and to ensure good service with reasonable prices. And one important point to note is also that, at least in Europe, all currently harmonized IMT spectrum in mid-bands are not fully available for operators in many countries and in many areas. And there are many reasons for this. For example, there are set aside for other services and incumbent protection, as well as cross-border restrictions. And in those areas, additional mid-band spectrum demand would be even greater than in other areas, as we also have in such areas kind of very populated areas. And we also believe that 6 gigahertz band offers an excellent opportunity to meet these demands of societies. And as Luciana nicely put it in the previous session, that there actually is no other option, and I will fully agree with that. And we believe that a licensed approach enables protection of existing use where protection is needed. With licensed approach, the uses are known and professionals do deploy the networks, which ensures that the license conditions to protect the existing use will be followed. Also, countries can make the licensing decisions based on national demands, but also based on demands for protection of incumbent use. So they can consider the future demands as well as the current demands. And because of this, we believe that the licensed approach would allow higher transmission powers compared to what is allowed for RLAN, for example. So what would be allowed for unlicensed use. Thank you. I think that was pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Päivi, for that overview of the situation in Europe and the decisions that has been made so far and the need you identified for the upper part of the 6 gigahertz band to be identified for IMT. I would now like to give the floor to the next panel member, Mohammed El Mogassi, the executive director from the NTRA in Egypt, of course, one of the most populous and one of the largest country in the region. So very important points, I'm sure you will make.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Cairo. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I think when we addressing a specific band such as 6 gigahertz, it's critical important to highlight the context and the timing. It goes without saying that the 6 gigahertz is a critical band for the future of 5G in terms of additional capacity, given that it seems that not all countries have the luxury to assign additional spectrum in other bands, such as C-band 3.5, due to the importance of such band for maybe countries in tropical regions, and also the occupation of the band by some legacy services in other countries. So if you take a close look at the ASMG countries, you will be surprised what spectrum is available for IMT. Having said that, I think the real question should be, should we wait for WRC 23 or to make a decision now? Unfortunately, there is a lot of uncertainty given the progress of studies at the ITUR. And that uncertainty doesn't give us much confidence of the decision at WRC 23. And that's why it's very important for us and for the industry to prepare different scenarios. That leads us to the second question, which is whether IMT identification is critical for the 6 gigahertz, or perhaps alternatively, should we adopt similar approach to the 3.6, 3.8? I think these are important questions, given the uncertainty we have that. And I guess industry should adapt to the situation and start seeking different scenarios of what we need to do in the ASMG region. I've seen several calls for harmonization, but it's important when we are talking about the ASMG is to focus on our country's need. We have a lot of, or some few countries that largely dependent on fiber, and some other countries that don't have any good infrastructure at all. Some countries that have assigned large amount of spectrum for IMT, and some other countries, as I have highlighted before, that still need more additional spectrum. And the mobile industry, if I may say, should consider from now the expenses of waiting for WRC, while other industries have made excellent use of being outside of WRC umbrella. To this end, I think again, and this is my humble request to the mobile industry, is to adapt to the situation, try and provide and convince ASMG countries on the importance of 6 giga for IMT. And what is the opportunity cost of making a wrong decision now? there should be some sort of outreach outside of the ITU before WRC. So countries, ASMG countries in a specific, have a clear picture of the situation. For example, what will happen to equipment of Wi-Fi 6 gigahertz if they are roaming in ASMG countries? Why a specific countries take a decision to identify 1.2 gigahertz for Wi-Fi? Is that decision useful for me, for my case? To this end, I believe the pandemic has caused a lot of uncertainty in a lot of aspects of our life. Yes, it highlights the importance of the mobile industry, the Wi-Fi industry, but it has also raised a lot of questions whether there is a need to additional spectrum for IMT in the near future. And as Mr. Tariq Al-Audi has highlighted in the first session, we need to be convinced individually upon the circumstances of Egypt or Saudi Arabia or UAE of why that decision would be important to us. We all should focus on why do we need the 6 gigahertz by WRC, but I think the real question is what will we lose if we miss that opportunity and WRC and having no chance of having additional spectrum identified for IMT at all in the giving band, giving that a Wi-Fi decision may be irreversible. Wi-Fi equipment, once they are there, they are there. Thank you so much, Stephen, and back to you.
Thank you very much for the point well made about the irreversibility of a decision. So not to rush it, I guess, is one of the things. So with that, I would like to move on to give the floor to Richard Margotlov, who speaks to us from South Africa, but today he's speaking on behalf of the 8DU. If you could please unmute yourself, Richard, and if you have sufficient bandwidth, also turn on your video so we can see you. So, but to begin with, please unmute yourself, Richard. There seems to be a connectivity problem. Let's just give it another 5 seconds. In that case, what I'll do, I'll move on to our next panel member, Tom Wickstrom, who is a special advisor to Traficom Finland. And I'm particularly pleased you're able to join this panel because we always look to Finland if we want to know what's happening in the future with traffic.
Well, thank you, Stefan, and good morning to everyone. I'm really honored to be here today. And as Stefan already introduced me, my name is Tom Wickstrom. I'm a special advisor at the Finnish Transport and Communications Agency, Traficom. I'm also the national coordinator for WRC 23 agenda items 1.2 and 1.3. Now, let me start with some facts about Finland. Well, Finland is a sparsely populated country with only 5.5 million inhabitants. Now, in Finland, 42% of us lives in the 10 biggest cities, which cover less than 4% of the whole geographical area of Finland. The population in the biggest cities is rapidly growing on the expense of countryside. The amount of data in Finnish mobile networks increased 33% during year 2020. And we can see that this growth is not slowing down this year and most likely not even during the coming years. To provide sufficient capacity for this rapidly increasing data traffic in these urban and suburban areas with increasing population using more and more data every year. Operators are currently expanding their 5G networks in the 3.6 GHz range. However, we feel that the amount of these mid-range frequencies may not be sufficient in the long run. Therefore, we need to look into the future and consider some additional mid-range frequency bands to cater for this rapidly increasing amount of data consumed by the growing population in these urban and suburban areas. One possible solution in the long run is to consider the possibilities given to us by WRC 23, Agenda Item 1.2. In other words, to consider whether it would be possible to use frequencies within this frequency range 6425 to 7125 for IMT systems. Currently in Finland, the whole frequency range is extensively used for fixed links. Within this range, we have totally 950 fixed link hops in operation at the moment. These links are deployed throughout the country with an average link distance of 18 kilometers. We have not made any decision yet to change the current use of this frequency range. Also, if and when we make a decision, we need to take into account the fact that licenses for these fixed links are usually valid for a period of 6 years. Additionally, Finland has access to a geostationary satellite orbit resource in the plan contained in Radio Regulations Appendix 30B for fixed satellite service in the frequency band 6725 to 7025 MHz. However, this resource is not in use. Since we use the whole band extensively for fixed service for a number of years to come, we are in no immediate hurry to change this regulatory environment. However, we have some indications from the fixed link users that in the long run they may be willing and able to vacate this frequency band. For example, when the current equipment comes to the end of its life cycle. Therefore, and taking into account the geographical spread of population in Finland, the continuously increasing amount of data, the indications from ongoing coexistence studies between IMT systems and existing primary services, as well as the indications from our current users, we consider that there could be a good opportunity to refarm this band, the national use within this band, to enable IMT use, starting from the most densely populated areas. This IMT use should not preclude the use of fixed links in rural areas where there would be less demand for capacity in IMT networks. Therefore, we are keeping a close eye on the coexistence studies conducted under WRC 23, Agenda Items 1.2, to be able to decide on the future of this band in the upcoming WRC. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tom, and I particularly liked your focus on the issue of 6 gigahertz for fixed services, FS, and of course a lot of that for mobile backhaul and the issues surrounding that, and that perhaps the issue in urban versus rural may not be the same. So with that, I hope we can now get Richard back. If you're around. Yes, here you are. Wonderful. If you could just unmute yourself, that would be great. So, as I said, Richard joining us from South Africa, but he is speaking today on behalf of the African Telecommunications Union. So, over to you, Richard.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much for the opportunity to the organizers as well and ASMG. Yes, my name is Richard Makhoto from the from ICASA, but I'm part of the management team of the Chapter 1 of the African Telecommunication Union with regards to issues related to IMT. If you go to the next slide, on the next slide, we believe in ATU that we considered the future needs for IMT in Africa as of 2019, because we expect that the 5G networks in the millimeter wave will be mostly deployed in hotspots and in big cities and densely populated areas. So, however, in order to enable the full capabilities of 5G, including the extended coverage, additional spectrum will be required, in particular in the middle bands. And why do we expect 6 gigahertz to be very important? We believe that globally allocated to the mobile service on a primary basis is a key component for the deployment of 6 gigahertz, given the good balance between coverage and capacity and the large bandwidth available in the 6 gigahertz. In addition, we look at economies of scale, specifically in Region 1, and with the interest in China and other countries that may join the footnote currently. Now, it is expected the use of Africa for mobile broadband and fixed wireless service to increase. Now, this given the low fiber and copper penetration, fixed wireless access, and which is a key technology to improve fixed coverage in Africa for African homes and bridge the digital divide. And therefore, the African region submitted proposal to WSC 19 to consider IMT identification for the frequency bands 5925 to 7125, amongst others, which is currently being considered for WSC 23. And in the next slide, Chair, the African Telecommunication Union prioritized Chapter 1, which also includes the agenda item 1.2, and they came up established a structure which has seven chairpersons, and in this particular case, we do have the APM, which is the highest decision-making body in Africa, and within that structure, we have Chapter 1, which deals with Agenda 1.2. Hence, we say we actually prioritized the use of 6 gig in the band. And therefore, Chair, the second preparatory African work preparatory meeting for WSC 23, the APM 23 agreed to conduct a survey among ATU member states to identify the services deployed at national level. And that survey is due to be submitted to the whole of Africa to consolidate and to find out the current usage in the band. And that is currently being consolidated at the moment. We also agreed that to preliminary support identification of the frequency band 6425 to 7125 megahertz for IMT, taking into account the results of coexistence studies. So if you go to the next slide, Chair, the African group also prioritized, on the next slide, Chair, let's go to the next slide, if we can. Yes, African administration are very much involved in the work of WSC 23 Agenda Item 1.2. There's a number of countries, including South Africa, we submitted contributions to Working Party 5G on topics such as parameters for studies relevant to the band for Africa. And in the previous meeting of Working Party 5G, Cameroon, Nigeria, and South Africa and Zimbabwe submitted the first study on coexistence of IMT and FSS uplink during the past meeting. And in addition, the African group is fairly actively involved, and our chapter coordinator in Africa was also appointed as the chair of the drafting group at Working Party 5D. So therefore, that gives Africa a leverage in order to be able to contribute meaningfully and participate meaningfully into the studies at WRC for WRC 23. So African countries will continue to contribute to the work of ITUR under this agenda item for the rest of the study cycle, and we're also inviting other countries in Region 1 to support to ensure that there's harmonization in the effort. So the 6425 to 7125 megahertz will be key for the deployment of IMT in the long term, and African countries are leading to in this work and to make it a reality. With this, Chair, let me submit for the consideration of the meeting, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And I think it is not surprising that the ATU has a very strong support for IMT in the upper 700 megahertz of the band, given the reliance in the continent of wireless and in particular mobile as the primary means of delivering access to its populations. So thank you very much, Richard. With that, I'd like to go to another Region 1 subgroup, and I'd like to introduce Sergei Rudko, who is the coordinator on agenda item 1.2 for the RCC. Over to you, Sergei.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. My name is Sergei Rudko, and I am the RCC coordinator on agenda item 1.2, and I would like to present to you some information with regard to the mid-band issue in the RCC countries. So, having dealt with mid-band, as it was indicated by previous speakers, we have a lot of opportunity with respect to the balance of great data speed together with the wide coverage of IMT. And taking this, the issue of allocation mid-bands for the IMT have been considered at previous WRCs for some bands, in particular in the range from 3 to 6 GHz band. We know that some band was allocated or identified for IMT. However, the decisions did not fully satisfy all countries, in particular the RCC countries, due to number of limitations with respect to compatibility. And the RCC were one of the regional group who proposed at WRC to consider mid-band, especially 6525 to 7100 megahertz. And taking into account that in the 3 gigahertz band, we have some difficulty for implementation of IMT due to wide use of fixed lead service in some RCC countries. Wherefore, the RCC countries consider 6 GHz band as one of the key band for development and launch 5G in the RCC regions. And currently, RCC countries are conducting study for harmonization of 6 GHz band. Next slide, please. At next slide, you can see the preliminary position of RCC administration with respect to agenda item 1.2 for 6 GHz band as approved at the previous RCC meeting. Actually, our position is divided to the 3 bands. You can find what RCC administration are in favor of the identification of IMT. But at the same time, we need to ensure compatibility with other radio systems. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. At next slide, you can see the RCC countries' current usage of mid-band. We have the fixed service microwave links, actually more than 1,000 stations around RCC country. and coordination may be required, but we're located mostly outside cities. And actually, we did sharing studies with respect to the fixed service and find the positive results. Also, we have geostationary FSS usage mostly in the first 100 megahertz band. And for other spectrum, it is limited usage of geostationary FSS. And for the no geostationary FSS, we have very limited number of operation system on the downlink, only downlink, and also space operation service and ESS passive need to be protected. Radio astronomy, limited number of station in specific site outside cities. Actually, we have 3 radio astronomy stations located somewhere in the mountains. But RCC countries are considering that radio astronomy is protected under Radio Regulation 5.149, and no any additional measures are required. I would like also say what the RCC country at present under development, the RCC recommendation harmonization of condition of use 5G system in our countries, which will define the conditions for the use of mid-band in the RCC countries. And with respect to my administration, Russian Federation, in accordance with the Russian regulatory's work plan for this and next year, the full-scale test of IMT equipment in 6 GHz band are planned. So with that, I conclude my short presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergey. This was very interesting, and in particular, you highlighted the issue that not in all countries the entire C-band may be available. I mean, some countries have the 400 megahertz, particularly in the EU countries and so on, but very often this is not the case. So all the more a reason to look for spectrum in the 6 gigahertz band. So thank you for your insights, Sergey. And I'd like to move on to our next panel member. We have a speaker on behalf of the industry, so the vendors. And we've got Ayman Mohideen, Head of Spectrum and Standardization from Nokia, but speaking here on behalf of the Mobile Vendors Group. So over to you, Ayman.
Assalamu alaikum to all in the ASMG region, and thank you, Stefan. As Stefan had introduced me, my name is Ayman Mohideen. I do work for Nokia, leading the spectrum standardization in Nokia. But today I'm going to present here in behalf of Ericsson, Huawei, and Nokia ZTE, our views and our recommendation, and also give some kind of a short view of what's happening on this agenda item under the preview of ITUR 5D work. We think that license 6 gigahertz is a good opportunity to serve all the society in all of it. And you can see that we have also thought about the region and what the region could benefit from that. I mean, the ASME region, how it could benefit from this 6 gigahertz band. Next slide, please. So I don't want to go into details, but this is only just an indicative figures that I wanted to bring to your attention. I believe my colleagues in the first session, they have gone through it in depth, but I just wanted to highlight that how is this 2 gigahertz have been calculated, or how it's going to, why do we have this 2 gigahertz? It takes into consideration a lot of mathematical competition and a lot of bands into consideration, but the ultimate goal is that we have the ITUR vision recommendation, which is talking about a downlink speed of 100 megabit per second, an uplink 100 area. area capacity of 100 megabit per second and a downlink of 50 megabit per second. And this is need to be met. This is one of the ultimate goal of the ITU, and how to meet it. We have to look at the different combination of spectral efficiency, other parameters and things like that, and where to meet it. It's almost you need to have a citywide high capacity coverage, and this is needed in a time frame which I look at it from today's point of view is a very let's say medium range. It's in 2025 up to 2030. So you need to address those needs in the smart cities. You need to provide to them the needed capacity to go on with the different application. This is one of the points to take into consideration. The other thing is that we have to look around the global, and we have seen that the 5G subscription is going to reach 3.5 billion by 2026. This is one of the things. And how would you feed all of those subscription? How would you respond to all their needs in terms of capacity, in terms of also medium coverage, if they are moving in urban areas? Like what Tom today have said, that he have that the traffic concentrated around certain areas in Finland, in 10 cities, around 10 cities. And how would you respond to those 10 cities, which is going to be exploded by this time frame in 2025 to 2030? This is an aspect. At the same time, we have seen, if you look at them, at the graph from the ITU report, the mobile traffic is expected to continue and grows to something around 300 gigabit per subscription by month in 2030. You can also take this out of it. At the same time, we have seen also from the subscription or from the Ericsson Mobility Report published in July 2020, you can see the increase, the exponential increase of those subscription. So all that are factors and numbers that need to be taken into consideration. And when we are planning what kind of spectrum we need, and the spectrum in the mid bands need to be planned so that we ensure all of those goals have been satisfied. Not only the goals, but we are also catering also for the evolution, for the IMT evolution, so that there will be evolution of applications, evolution of the technology itself. So the whole point of it is that we need this to an average of 2 gigahertz of spectrum in a mid-band, and this is needed for the growth of 5G. Second slide, please. Then coming back, this is all the factors which we take into consideration how we need that spectrum. But now we have to look at this at the 6 gigahertz and its performance, its technical performance. There are a lot of work have been done and is still ongoing to compare the performance of 6 gigahertz with, for example, the 3.5 gigahertz band. And in this graph, you can see that with this comparison, you can see that the spectral efficiency performance is comparable between the 3.5 and the upper 6 gigahertz. And this have been not only just from a simulation point of view, but this is also have been in a field test done in March 2021 in a prototype around the city to check this performance. And this is the graph of the performance. And you see that the red one is the 3.5 and the yellow one is upper 6 gigahertz. And you can see that it's almost comparable, the performance of that one. Maybe someone will come and ask, yeah, but what is about the propagation and what is about this? You have also to consider that the technology is evolving. There is an advanced technology enhancement in the antenna system and the base station architecture, and this is will evolve. And this is how it results in this same or comparable performance. Also, one of the advantages is that if you are going to deploy 5G at 6 gigahertz, you may also reuse the same site because you will have a 3.5 gigahertz band is already in that one. It's with the changes of the base station architecture, with using advanced antenna systems technology. This is all can be done. There is still ongoing field trials on the coverage and capacity, and how this coexistence is announced in several countries, in several countries, these field trials are announced and they are going on way, and we will keep updating as soon as we have new results. This is one part of the technology. The other part is that we also wanted to see what is how is this 5G is comparable to other technologies, for example, Wi-Fi. So, and we did a simulation taking into consideration a certain kind of assumptions, and it sees that in a tough requirement, in an industry requirement, like for example, if you have Industry 4.0 application like surveillance camera or augmented reality or automation or something like this, if you look at here and you place a 5G and you compare it with an optimized Wi-Fi physical layer interface and try to and do the MAC access and all of those things, you find that 5G delivers three times efficiency than the Wi-Fi 6 in this most of tough and challenging quality of services like latency. You have to have latency and reliability in this industrial and indoor environment. So in that sense, that when we have those simulation and compare them also with that, when we see that the 6 gigahertz, when it's deployed with a 5G advanced technology, it's going to give us a very good results that could be used for different application, not only the broadband application, but also industry 4.0 application. Second slide, please. This is on the technology slides. Let's go to the second slide. So then we have to look at the traffic, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this traffic because in the first session in the morning, Peter from Vodafone had also said that the Wi-Fi load, the Wi-Fi offload trends is decreasing, and you can see in the right-hand side, that is an example from Korea. I've been looking at an example from ASMG. I found a web page called Mirias in Saudi Arabia, but I couldn't find an example comparing the Wi-Fi offload. But I found something about the data on how it's being used in Saudi Arabia, for example. But taking this example, and we have to see that the Wi-Fi offload is going down because there is a 5G uptake in these countries, and I'm expecting as well this will be the case in other different areas, that there will be an offtake and there will be also a Wi-Fi offload will go down, whereas we are going to see an increase of using the 5G. So, for example, from an Ericsson mobility Ericsson consumer report, they have found out in average, you have 20% of 5G users. They have decreased the Wi-Fi use when they have upgraded, or they have when they are at home, or they have in other location. They will turn off their phone, and then they will turn off the Wi-Fi in the phone, and then maybe they will use the 5G. And in some leading countries, it was also estimated that there is a 10% in a leading 5G market. They are 10% claims they have stopped using Wi-Fi on a smartphone after they have 5G. So they are relying on a 5G connectivity, mainly because of quality of service, mainly because of that they are not going to have an interruption of services. They are going to have a continuous things. Then I have to say that Wi-Fi is also not a bad technology. We are all using the Wi-Fi, but the problem is not on the Wi-Fi. The problem is on the fixed broadband. The fixed broadband is a bottleneck on this home broadband. So if it's being, you have to take it from all different aspects. So you need to take all of those things into that consideration, and I guess that this bottleneck on the fixed broadband is one of the reasons why we are having this consumer behavior on 20% and 10%. Second slide, please. So now the work is undergoing, as this is an agenda item to be carried on. And the band is, the incumbent in the band are the fixed satellite services and fixed services, and coexistence need to be studied in 5D. The work have already studied, and we admit is that uplink protection of fixed link is a global issue, and that it needs to be resolved at the ITU level. But also, some studies shows that if you are using an active antenna system with beamforming, you are going to facilitate those coexistence. And also remember that we have moved years in the technology, and there are a lot of advances in the technology. And in this, when we are using the accurate methods, for example, for character loss or building entry loss and all of those things, we are going to see more and more positive things. And in the last 5D meeting had happened in October last month, we have seen some simulation results that have been submitted, and it shows a positive margin of coexistence between FFS and IMT in this 6 gigahertz using those advanced technology parameters. I have also to bring to the attention here, for example, today, there are also some other parts that FFS is not used. So if it's in less use, that means there is also a good and positive trends in this band. Then come up to the fixed links, and it's an important services and important services to be delivered. It delivers also all of those data. When we look at the nature of the fixed links in the 6 gigahertz, is mostly used in a backhaul for long distance, for point-to-point links in a backhaul. And when we also compare it to the condition of the use of the IMT, and IMT mostly going to be used in urban, suburban areas, so there is a good chance of the coexistence, taking that into the consideration, knowing that where are those antenna are, and you know where the antenna in the rural area and things like that. So this is also an indication how those coexistence could be positively thought about it. There is also some possibility if you are having IMT and fixed links and in the same band, you can do also as a good of coordination, and this is a case by case, but it also should be taken into consideration. And if you do it under the licensed regime, it's easy to do the coordination, unlike if you do it in an unlicensed regime. So I'm not going to go too much on that discussion on how is the coexistence on FS with IMT, but also in October meeting of 5D, there are also results. There are also several studies have been done, and they are showing the possibility that IMT can coexist. I have to say that 5D had already started to discussing this sharing and compatibility and sharing and coexistence with the incumbent. We need to look at it. We need to analyze those things, but the first results are a bit of positive. Second slide, please. So, having gone through all the needed quality of service, all of those things, we think that a balanced approach in WRC23 is an opportunity that we have a harmonized spectrum for IMT that is responding to the need for the mid-bands spectrum need, and this will offer a large and continuous channel for 5G as comparable to a continuous citywide coverage application. So what we are appealing is that we need to think about the balanced approach. We need to think about that the identification of IMT in WRC23 is a long-term decision. We have heard that it's if you take a decision for a license, you cannot reverse it back. It's irreversible. So taking a decision before the WRC may hinder the 5G evolution, and we need to take into that consideration because it's irreversible. You cannot return it back. This decision it should be taken at some point of time, but we have to think about a balanced approach. And I would say appropriate balance between license and license exempt is needed and is required for the evolution of 5G and also for responding to the ITU vision goals. I would also like to say a last word is that 6 gigahertz is not a battleground. 6 gigahertz, we have to look at from what to satisfy each country need. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ayman. In particular, your focus on coexistence, both on the fixed satellite services and also fixed services, and the issue there that, of course, in a license regime, it does make it easier to handle coexistence issue. With that, I perhaps would like to remind people that when you look at the way ARLAN or the entire 1.2 gigahertz in the US are used for Wi-Fi 6. It's not Wi-Fi as we know it. There are different flavors and restrictions for indoor use only, and all sorts of workaround, such as that some equipment must not work outdoors. You can't make it protected from rain and so on. So I wonder how that's going to work. We'll now go over to the panel, but at that point, I'd also like to ask the audience to submit further questions. We already have got a few, but I'll kick this off by asking one question for our panel members. So we see there's a great deal of interest and need for an IMT identification in 6425 to 7125 megahertz. There are plans for products, tests are happening. What happens if that spectrum is not being made available for IMT? What would be the consequences? Who would like to take that? Paivi?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I can start. So as a mobile operator, so we do see or expect data growth in mobile networks, like huge data growth in mobile networks in 5 to 10 years. And if we don't get additional spectrum, it would require very heavy network densification, especially in urban and suburban areas. And this, of course, means very high cost. And that's either not affordable for operators to do this, which means worse mobile connectivity, or then it will lead to higher cost of end users. And of course, in addition, such densification may actually not even be possible due to EMF compliance requirements that we have in basically all countries, and that's of course about the security of people as well, and also that's not sustainable from the economical perspective, because if we need to densify that heavily, that is likely to increase the carbon footprint of the networks as well. So that I think is something that I can bring to this question.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from yes, Mohammed? Mohammed, please go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
All right. Theoretically speaking, and giving our past experience with other bands, we don't want to repeat the C-band story, where we discuss 3.4, 3.6, WRC 2007, WRC 2012, and I don't remember, but until today, some countries just still study the possibility of using the C-band, although the issue was exhausted at the WRC. Similar situation for the UHF. We spend years discussing a very obvious issue for me. big opportunity
Sorry.
missing, because if things are not resolved in WRC 23, I guess we will keep, yeah, I guess we will keep seeing the same issue discussed on WRC 27, if not WRC 32. That's a big miss.
So I think we are having some connectivity problems there. Mohammed dropped out. Any other comments on that topic? If not, then I've got another question here. Relating in particular, we can maybe talk a little bit more about the coexistence between IMT on the one hand and fixed services and FSS on the other hand. Perhaps we can focus a little bit more on that. This was this other question here about coexistence. Who would like to take that? Sergey? Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you, Stephen. With respect to coexistence, at least in RCC country, we did some studies, and actually we have presented the contribution at the Working Party 5D, which show the compatibility cases between service. So we have in-band sharing study between fixed service and IMT, and show that separation distance in some cases even less than 1 kilometer. So we don't expect that, let me say, the big issue between IMT and fixed service. And we also, under development, the material and analysis coexisting between IMT and fixed satellite service. So we consider the uplink geostationary fixed service satellites, and we already see the, let me say, positive results. And I believe at the next Working Party 5D, we will submit contribution from RCC countries. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on that? For example, maybe another question in that context is: are fixed links in 6 gigahertz really something that is future-proof, given the growing capacity needs for fixed links, or are we really seeing that fixed links are in fact migrating to the higher frequency bands in 40 to 80 gigahertz that are becoming now available? So is the problem, in other words, going away, the coexistence problems? Would anybody like to take that question? No? Okay. Then another question we have here, of course, it was said that the 6 gigahertz is targeted for macro IMT coverage. Is that really possible, given the differences in the propagation characteristics between 3.5 and 6 gigahertz? Ayman, perhaps you can answer that from the manufacturer's perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, there are. I think I have just gone very quickly in one of the slides about it, and I have shown some kind of a field trial on how to compare both of 3.5 and the 6 gigahertz. But if you look at the propagation characteristic from the different of them, there are approximately a 5 dB line of sight differences, or a gap between 3.5 and 6 gigahertz, but this can be compensated, and can be compensated with a new base station architecture, with advanced antenna system, with new things like that. So the advances in technology and the simulation which we have carried, and the test and the field trial test, have shown that they are comparable despite the differences in these propagation conditions.
Great, yeah, and I think that's a very important contribution. Of course, the technology improvements apply to 3.5 as well, but what it does show is that indeed you can deploy it on a macrocellular environment. Any other comments on that topic? If not, I have another specific question from the audience. This goes to Ayman, and this is from Detlef Führer. With 5G, 70% of traffic from mobile devices may be transferred over Wi-Fi. I think this is based on Cisco numbers. And so the question, does the figure of 257 gigabytes per subscriber per month include the Wi-Fi traffic, or is that purely what's going to be transferred over the mobile networks?
Thank you for the question from Happy. But this is an estimation from an ITU report, and it includes all the application from an ITU report. So I would say to you, maybe we have to look at the ITUR report in depth and look at it and look how they have estimated. And I believe they have also taken into consideration on Wi-Fi. Because in all of those things which we do in ITUR, we are also having them. I think Baby wanted to give an answer to that one, so yeah. I will let Baby do it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I cannot give answer to the numbers you have presented, but just to give a view on like how I see the Wi-Fi, I don't see it's like either like from the user perspective, it's either Wi-Fi or IMT. Wi-Fi is basically about distributing or kind of forwarding your internet access within some area, home or office, to more devices or to mobile devices. But you anyway need to have the internet access to that area, so to home, which you then can distribute over Wi-Fi. And for example, in Finland, many households are actually using mobile access as the main internet access at home instead of fixed or fiber connectivity. And in this case, the capacity bottleneck will be in the mobile side rather than the Wi-Fi access or Wi-Fi distribution within home. So I don't think that it's kind of only about like it's about Wi-Fi traffic or IMT traffic. Both are important. But I see, of course, that the capacity demand will be bigger in the IMT side.
Yes, which any more comments of that? If not, I have a follow-up question to that. I think that relates to the access bottleneck, which might be particularly relevant for countries such as Egypt or other African countries. Perhaps you can comment a little bit on that. Where do you see the bottleneck? Is it in fact possible to build out a fiber infrastructure to make use of more spectrum for Wi-Fi? Is that possible in Africa, or is it easier to do it with 5G? Yes, Mohammed, please go ahead. And also, first Mohammed, then Richard. I think they're having a little bit of a bandwidth problem. Obviously slow. I think we go over to Richard. Richard, do you want to?
Well, yes, yeah, no, thank you very much. Yes, with regard to Wi-Fi in
Good, yeah. Maybe Sergey or Tom can take this as well, since we have lost our friends from Africa. So Sergey, this is about the bottleneck. Is it, in fact, the fixed network? Sergey?
Oh, yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Yes. We have networks. Let me say what we are intended to do in RCC countries right now. We have developed already the RCC recommendations. So since we have the allocation of mobile service in the actual table of allocation, so we expect that in WRC we will not have any main restriction with respect to 5G in mid-band. And even if, as it was in first question, WRC will not get any identification to IMT, I think that in that case we need somehow also use this band for IMT, especially in RCC countries. But of course we will fit all international limitation and restrictions having to do with radio regulations. And what about architecture of IMT? I don't know really what is the final structure of base station and so on. So it's now under development in RCC. But we have deal with 3GPP and we have number of licensed statement each other in order to fit all the standards. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. We now got Mohammed and Richard back. Perhaps first over to Richard. I hope you have a stable connection now. Maybe you can now take that question. No, broke again. In that case, we go to Mohammed. Oh dear, this is not working well. Well, we definitely need some more IMT identification and 5G for the African continent. That's for sure. Hey, Tom, I see you putting up your hand. So if you unmute yourself, love to hear from you.
Oh, thank you, Stefan. Well, I would like to confirm the issue that Päivi brought up, that in Finland, actually, a lot of households are relying on the mobile networks for the internet connections, and that's actually what I do at the moment. I use both Wi-Fi as well as mobile network for this presentation and the current communications with you all guys. So I think both are very important, but looking at the growing figures of data in mobile networks in Finland, I think that might be the actual bottleneck in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Päivi?
Maybe to complement also that the Wi-Fi and RLAN use is typically low power, so you actually can reuse the resources in quite nearby. So then you don't need that much kind of spectrum at one specific point, because then you can reuse the same spectrum, like within like 100 meters or something.
I think that's an important point, the indoor versus outdoor perspective and the power aspect of this.
Stephen, can you hear me?
Now we can hear loud and clear, so please go ahead.
So, true story. I've been trying to log in through the Wi-Fi connection in the place where I am, and now I'm on a personal connection on 4G. So the moral of the story is not Wi-Fi is bad and mobile is good. It depends on where you are. A decision to identify 1.2 gigahertz for Wi-Fi could be good for some country and could be bad for some country. Also, the questions with regard to the identification and coexistence, as Egypt or as an individual country, we should all think about what is the FSS density in my country. How am I depending on FSS? What is the current situation of Wi-Fi? Do I have a congestion in the Wi-Fi bands? What about the IMT bands? Am I allocating or identifying all the bands for IMT? That's why my colleague Sergey from RCC, he has highlighted that even identified bands in the C band are not available, which is the case for some other countries. So that's why we should be careful about the context. The decision of Saudi Arabia of 1.2 for Wi-Fi may be excellent for Saudi Arabia, but may not be good for other countries, and similarly for the mobile industry. That's why it's important to have a collective view of FSS, mobile, and Wi-Fi, considering what is the pros and cons of taking a decision now in favor of Wi-Fi or waiting for a decision at WRC 23. And the third scenario that I was trying to highlight, what if WRC wouldn't agree on IMT identification in the 6 gigahertz? The mobile industries and even us should be prepared with alternative scenario for coexistence for FSS. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think you nicely summarized some of the issues here. Perhaps Sergey is still putting up his hand. Okay, we can 1 more minute. So Sergey, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just want to say that right now I speak via mobile, not via Wi-Fi. And in Russia, especially in place where I am now, we have 5G in 4.9 gigahertz band, and I just using this device and give traffic into my laptop, and now I see HD quality all your pictures. So I think it's great. And like people in RCC, a lot, or maybe in all the world, we see all the time increasing demand and increasing, let me say, all people need more and more traffic. I don't know why, maybe because content is now all the videos. So, but again, we already have 5G in mid-band in 4.9 gigahertz band. Thank you.
Well, so in fact, we need to stop talking about Wi-Fi offload. The name of the game is in fact Wi-Fi onload onto the 5G networks. So with that, we've reached the end of our time, and I would like to thank the panel. Thank you for making the time available and overcoming the difficulties and giving us such a good demonstration on how the use of mobile, even if it's just 4G, actually does solve the connectivity problem. So thank you, Paivi, Mohammed, Richard, Tom, Sergey, and Ayman. And also thank you to the audience for the excellent questions you have been asking throughout. So I believe there will be some downloads available here on this website, or you can watch the video later. But thank you very much. This brings this panel session to an end. Dan, if you...
Thank you, Stefan. Yes, so on behalf of the organizers of this event, Ericsson, GSMA, Huawei, Nokia, and ZTE, I hope everyone has enjoyed the event. From ourselves, I hope you found the platform has worked well. I've seen there's been quite a bit of interaction on the platform, lots of questions, lots of comments. For anyone whose questions or comments weren't responded to, I know there were quite a few questions there. We will be forwarding those to the event partners and to the speakers who will be able to answer those directly. So I hope everyone has enjoyed the event. We are going to be, or the organizers, I should say, so all of the event partners are going to be hosting another seminar on 6 gigahertz, which is going to be held focusing on the European region, and that's going to be on the 2nd of November. And I'm sure they will be in touch to provide you with more information on that shortly. That will again be using the same platform as we have been using today. So thank you very much to Stefan, all of the speakers, and thank you to all of you for participating at this event. And yeah, as I said, I'm sure the organizer will be in touch to follow up with things on that, and they would like to welcome you again to their next 6 gigahertz event on the 2nd of December. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.